the point of dating is an investment. So you should always work towards marriage. Um, if you date someone out of, I mean, through because of adrenaline, romance slash fun, those are great things. Those are things that helps us in some ways. But I don't think that I think that would be as if that those two things were the only thing that the point of dating is, that would be maybe a little shallow. But I think that dating should be serious, should be intentional, should be a an investment towards the future, just like every other relationship, like friendship or relationship with your parents. Building those relationship are should be intentional and benefit you, for both of us. And but as same thing with romantic relationships, I think it should be I think it should be that. Of course, fun and romance is great things too, but like, but yeah.
I like, I think at first, when I first started considering dating, I would have been more on, let me say it another way. I agree with the way that Jacqueline approaches it, because I think when you're dating in the pure sense of what dating is just getting to know the person, you're going out to hang out, do fun things, see where their mind is at, what type of person they are. I think that there should be in your mind this thought of, I am pursuing marriage eventually, but at the same time, I wouldn't go into it thinking, this is my spouse, I have to marry this person, because then you get yourself in a lot of tricky situations. So I think at that stage, there is, like Lee said, intentionality to it, but you're probably having a little bit more fun at first, just trying to get to know the person, laughing, and then when you move on to that next stage of, okay, I'm really considering, then I say that that should be, that's more serious. Like we're saying, you're talking about kids. What do they think about? How do they handle money? What do they, where do they want to live? What are their goals, their dreams, their aspirations? I think that would be a really good time. Probably, I mean, that a necessary time to have those conversations, and then moving forward. And I have different ways that I view dating. I view it that way when you're truly searching. I do think that God intervenes a lot. In my case, He has intervened and He speaks directly to certain situations. So there's some people they meet and that's it. Like they meet the person they know, and then that's a wrap. There's no like stages to it. But I think if you're going through like traditional dating of trying to actually search, there's stages and there's different focuses at different times.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that um, we also have this thing in the church as a whole where we pick one of the three. And if you play Pokemon, you know about the starter Pokemon. You have the grass type, water type, fire type, and that can go into into marriage, romance, and fun. And I think in the overall Christian church, we have this thing where we focus on only one of those items and we exclude the others. So some of us we're raised up to only date for marriage. That means everyone you date, you're like, this is going to be the person right here. And if it fails and falters, you get depressed because, oh my gosh, I messed up. That was my only chance. Then we get into fun, and then people tell you like, oh, you're on a date for fun. How dare you enjoy yourself? And then because people think it's just hedonistic to date for fun. Then on the other side, there's romance where I want to be wanted. I want someone to come to me and say, "Oh, I miss you," give you a hug. How have you been? And then some people think that's too sensual or whatever. And there's all these different reasons not to and for things. But I think that if we find a way to balance it and ask God to guide us in that, I think we can find a good path forward. So,
I agree.
Jacqueline, do you have any more to say about that? Because I know you always have a thought in your mind.
Yeah, sure, I can add. I think you know, there's obviously a perspective that you have that when you were growing up that was instilled in you, but everyone's different, and everyone has a different love language. And so I think based off your love language, that's what you should go for. I don't think there's anything wrong if you're dating and you have fun and romance in it, especially if that's someone you end up married. That's actually really great. You were able to have that from the beginning all the way to the end. But the greatest thing is like you can't go in it thinking everyone you meet is going to be someone you marry. Or, you know, especially in church too, people will be like trying to match make and put people together. And it's like, no, you know, we actually don't have anything in common. We wouldn't be compatible. The way we argue wouldn't actually bring us closer, but bring us apart. Things like that. And so, the more you can have like those deep conversations in the beginning, the easier it is you can place that person on what type of relationship you're going to have with them. I think a lot of times we don't have these conversations because we feel like it'd be uncomfortable, or it'll make us uncomfortable, that person uncomfortable. But the reality is that if you don't have them earlier on, when you have them later and you realize like, oh man, my boyfriend and I aren't compatible, I wish we had these conversations earlier, it's actually going to be hurting you in the long run even more. So I think whatever perspective you had growing up, I believe like you probably shouldn't have that same perspective, because we're always changing, we're always growing and maturing. And so while those values and standards are so important to have, those values and standards should fit who you are today as well.
So, you know, that's all well and good. So I guess my last question could be, how has your faith impacted you with the pressure of getting married? How has that changed your perspective, you know, good or bad?
Growing up, I grew up Christian, but my parents were not like hyper Christian, I guess. Like they were spiritual and Christian, but it wasn't like a traditional or legalistic type thing. So I never had like, we talked about marriage, that was an expectation growing up. We expect to be married, but it wasn't like a you better get married or else you fail kind of thing. It was just, yeah, when you grow up and get married, kind of, it just was, you know, that's what you grow up in. That's one of the things that you do is get married. So for me, I just had I feel like a neutral perspective as far, I mean, neutral with pressure, but I had a positive perspective as far as marriage because of my parents having a healthy marriage. And then that was only strengthened as I've gotten older and seeing their faith when it comes to dealing with what do I want to say, some controversial issues that come up in marriage, and seeing the way that they handle that and the way that they continue to grow together. So in that aspect, I wouldn't say that there was a lot of negative pressure. With specific things in marriage, there's pressure for me, but that's like that would be more from the church in a stereotypical sense. So when people say things like, oh, this is bound to happen in marriage, or things have to happen this way, that's where I would find a lot of pressure or fear or concern, because it's like, well, dang, like if, you know, my story has to match their story. Otherwise, you know, maybe I'm not doing marriage right or something. So when people say like, oh, you're going to fight or you're going to hate each other, I like, okay, at some point I have to hate this person, or at some point I have to be really angry with them, or like after a year of dating or after a year of marriage, we have to erupt into some crazy fight. So there was a lot of negatives that I think surprisingly came up as I got older. But more recently, I've been encouraged because I've met a lot of people that say like marriage is hard and that they've had difficult times with their spouses, but that they've never been angry or wanted to leave their spouse. I'm hearing testimonies of people saying that they've never wanted to have a divorce, just as much as I'm hearing people say that they have wanted divorces at times. So yeah, just to try to sum that all up with that pressure kind of perspective, it kind of didn't happen until I was an adult going to church with other people saying what their experience with marriage was. But home life was pretty neutral.